Last time, in episode 9, we talked about 2021. Our Chinese Navy used the 1,000-armed Guanyin system and had a back-and-forth with the US. None of this was reported in the news, but foreign media were all eagerly watching. They had more people following this drama than we did, which is quite normal. Whenever something big happens, a crowd of onlookers gathers. There are bystanders everywhere in the world. Life is like that too. What is a lifetime? It's laughing at others and being laughed at. That's it for life. Alright, let's not get too philosophical. Anyway, back then, the whole world was focused on the South China Sea. It was clear that the Americans weren't gaining much. Their ocean-class nuclear submarine was even damaged in a collision, and they had to keep quiet about it. America's global dominance was slowly eroding. Think about it, in such a situation, how could the US just swallow their pride? When has America ever taken a hit like this, whether in front of mighty Russia or the supposedly dignified Europeans? The US always speaks from a position of strength, but, since the 1950s, and even before the founding of the People's Republic of China, America has never had the upper hand with China. Sometimes they thought they had the upper hand, but after a few more steps, they realized they suffered a big loss. That kind of feeling is particularly frustrating. In Chinese culture, there's a phrase called needle hidden in cotton. By the end of 2021, Americans finally understood what this meant. What does a needle hidden in cotton mean? It's like a big bag of cotton. It looks soft, harmless, and cute. But try punching it, and you'll find your hand bleeding, because inside that cotton are countless tiny needles. If you touch it, you'll definitely get pricked. This is also the nature of the Chinese people. In any dealings with us, the US has never felt comfortable. They always feel off and end up at a loss. The only time they felt good was in 2009 when we bought US Treasury bonds. But 10 years later, they realized that China had bought those bonds to use against them a decade later, dumping them when they needed it the most. The panda is truly too cunning. For these reasons, the Americans thought, why not just finish this once and for all? Since the end of the last century, they've been wanting to deal with the panda, but somehow never found the right time. First it was bin Laden, then Omar, then Saddam. And just like that, they dragged it out for 20 years, but they can't delay any longer. If they wait any longer, the panda won't just be a panda anymore, but a mythical one. So, right after they withdrew from Afghanistan in August 2021, they sent the USS Carl Vinson, the first aircraft carrier equipped with F-35C fighter jets, to the Western Pacific that very month. What's the Western Pacific? It's the area between the first and second island chains. Their combat objective was clear, targeting the panda. An aircraft carrier with F-35S represents the most powerful combat force of the US Navy. The F-35C is called the Future Air Wing, integrating active and passive sensors, which provides fleet commanders with situational awareness and power projection. What does this mean? It means the F-35C is not just a fighter jet. It has situational awareness capabilities and is equipped with electronic reconnaissance, electronic warfare, and airstrike abilities. It's clearly a fifth-generation fighter, and it's the carrier-based version, capable of taking off from the deck of an aircraft carrier at any time. Given how advanced the F-35C's electronics are, it's obviously connected to the C4 system. Its combat strategies, command, and navigation don't require human input. They're all optimized by the C4 neural network system. So the F-35C, along with the entire F-35 series, will be America's main air power in future wars. Whether it's seizing air superiority, bombing ground targets, or even attacking enemy surface vessels, the F-35 will handle it. Some people ask, what about the F-22? The F-22 is no longer relevant. First, its production line has been dismantled, so it can't be produced anymore. Second, against China's meter-wave phased array radar, its stealth advantage has been repeatedly proven ineffective. So what's the point of keeping it? The F-22's main combat mode was to penetrate enemy airspace while fully stealthy, destroying air defense systems, radars, and priority targets in the first wave. But now, we've seen through all its tricks. As a result, the US has lost interest in purchasing more of these jets. Its role has become obsolete. In the near future, without the F-22, the US will only have one fifth-generation jet left. The F-35 series. The U.S. military has high hopes for the F-35 and is very confident. Why? Because the F-35 is indeed impressive. Its strength lies not in its air-to-air combat abilities or its stealth, but in its complex electronic systems, data collection capabilities, stability, and modularity. With slight modifications to its engine or certain modules, it can become a different type of fighter. For military enthusiasts like us, the F-35 is also known for its vertical takeoff and landing capabilities. A pretty cool and practical feature. Indeed, it's quite useful, but not all F-35s can do this. For example, the F-35A cannot perform vertical takeoff and landing. It still uses a traditional glide landing mode. And it's a single-engine, single-seat fighter. What does single-engine mean? It means it has only one engine, the Pratt & Whitney F-35-100 turbofan engine. Its primary role is to replace the F-46 and A-10 attack aircraft. This shows its air combat capabilities are strong, and it can perform multi-role missions, both air combat and ground attack. The only version capable of vertical takeoff and landing is the F-35B, nicknamed Fat Lightning. Why Fat Lightning? Because it has a massive Pratt & Whitney F-35-600 turbofan engine and a Rolls-Royce lift system inside. Its role is to replace the Harrier jump jet. Have you seen Arnold Schwarzenegger's movie True Lies Asterisk? At the end, Schwarzenegger flies a Harrier, which can take off and land vertically. But to achieve vertical takeoff and landing, the F-35B sacrifices a lot of power. So it flies much slower and is mainly equipped in the Marine Corps as air support for ground troops. The other version, the F-35C, is what we're focusing on today. The F-35C is the U.S. Navy's carrier-based version. It has a Pratt & Whitney F-35-400 turbofan engine and is designed to replace the F-A-48 Super Hornet. The F-35C is designed for short takeoff and folding wings to save space on the carrier deck. For better maneuverability, the F-35C is slightly larger. Of the three versions, only the F-35A retains a 25mm fixed cannon. The F-35B and F-35C don't have cannons. Why? Because the F-35A still performs ground attack missions. Where it needs a cannon to scrape the ground, meaning strafing ground targets, it might seem primitive, but it's extremely useful in ground warfare. Which is why the US A-10 attack aircraft has been in service for half a century without being retired. That aircraft is fantastic for attacking ground targets, but you need air superiority first. Otherwise, while strafing, you might run into trouble. Some might ask why we're spending so much time introducing the F-35. First, this program isn't a political one, it's for military enthusiasts. So introducing different weapons is part of the theme. Second, this aircraft is the main character in the next part of the story. Now, you should have a general impression of the F-35. Just a general impression: its engines, radar, air-to-air missiles, and control systems. We'll compare in more detail once it goes up against our forces. So, has the fight started? Yes, but that's a story for May 2022, and we'll get to that bit by bit. By August 2021, the U.S. had already deployed its most advanced air and sea forces to the South China Sea. Their intentions were clear. It wasn't just a threat, it was the real deal. By the end of August, the F-35C, along with the US B-52H bombers, conducted joint exercises in the airspace north of Guam. The drill was a joint penetration operation. Why the exercise? Well, in modern warfare, before actual combat begins, you need to prepare your troops. After all, when the USS Vinson arrived from afar, it needed to conduct adaptive controls or exercises. The purpose of this drill was less about demonstrating power and more about preparing for real combat. It was a clear sign of intent to engage. Think about it, this was August 2021. By September, the Vinson passed through the Balabac Strait and then the Strait of Malacca. From its course, it was heading west, passing through the Philippines and the Malacca Strait. Where was it heading? It was clearly moving towards Myanmar. As I mentioned in the last episode, if the US messes with Myanmar, China's backyard is in trouble. Now, when I say mess with, I don't mean the US occupying Myanmar. In this era, the cost of occupation is too high. Unlike in Genghis Khan's time, when conquering a city often involved mass slaughter and enslaving survivors, making governance unnecessary. Today, such actions would lead to global condemnation. Today's world is interconnected. No country wants to become a financial or trade pariah. Of course, Israel may act differently, but that's an exception. We'll see what consequences they face. Now, back to the Carl Vinson. So how did the US plan to interfere in Myanmar? In early 2021, Aung San Suu Kyi was overthrown by Min Aung Hlaing in a military coup. Aung San Suu Kyi had been backed by the US and represented some Western interests, but she wasn't an ordinary politician. She knew not to lean entirely toward the West being so close to China. That would be a risky move. So she maintained a balance, navigating among the major powers, China, the US, and Russia. But her domestic governance failed. She was too weak in controlling the military. Min Aung Hlaing accused her of violating the constitution and staged a coup. Did Aung San Suu Kyi really violate the constitution? Technically, yes. Her husband was British, and Myanmar's constitution explicitly prohibits anyone with foreign spouses or immediate family members from holding the presidency. Thus, Aung San Suu Kyi was never eligible to be president. Yet she was the leader of the National League for Democracy (NLD), so what could be done? Replace her with someone else? That would risk losing U.S. financial support, as Washington only recognized Aung San Suu Kyi. After the NLD's election victory, she established a governing body that advised the president. In reality, Aung San Suu Kyi wielded more power than the president, creating a precarious situation. Min Aung Hlaing's coup had a valid reason behind it, and the U.S. wasn't too pleased with Aung San Suu Kyi in recent years, given her balanced approach between global powers. The U.S. felt betrayed, especially after deals like the Kyaukphyu port and the oil and gas pipeline agreements with China. By September 2021, with the USS Carl Vinson nearing Myanmar, the U.S. plan was clear: support the NLD, provide arms to Aung San Suu Kyi's loyalists, and pressure Min Aung Hlaing to release her. The goal was to ensure that if she regained power, she would be fully compliant with U.S. interests, particularly in cutting ties with China and Russia. However, as things unfolded, the conflict in Myanmar seemed more like a drawn-out negotiation, with both sides making tactical moves rather than engaging in full-scale combat. Meanwhile, in China's backyard, things were heating up. Various military factions, including the Kokang and Arakan armies, formed alliances, further complicating the situation for U.S. interests in the region. The newly formed Three Brothers Alliance united these factions across a strategic area, threatening U.S. plans for Myanmar, especially concerning the Kyaukphyu port and the oil and gas pipelines. In short, by trying to destabilize Myanmar, the U.S. inadvertently strengthened the opposition, making their efforts seem futile. As the situation dragged on, it became evident that a prolonged conflict wasn't in anyone's interest. In the end, the USS' initial goal of undermining China's influence in Myanmar fell apart. And this is where the episode veered off course. Today's topic was supposed to be electronic warfare, but I got carried away talking about Myanmar. Alright, let's continue talking about the USS Carl Vinson. Where were we? Right, by late September, the Carl Vinson had reached near Myanmar. Now, if we rewind the clock a bit, this was late September 2021. At that time, General Peng was still in the mountains fighting his guerrilla warfare. But something strange happened by October 2021. Less than a month later, the Carl Vinson had passed through the Bashi Channel and exited the South China Sea. That was quite unusual. What does that mean? Wasn't it supposed to be focused on Myanmar? You might recall what I mentioned in my previous episode. On October 2, 2021, there was a submarine collision, right? After that collision, the South China Sea was in chaos, as if something supernatural was going on. The Carl Vinson immediately turned around and fled. It needed to ensure its own safety. This shows the American mindset: pure individualism. When something goes wrong, they run, looking out for themselves first. There's no sense of camaraderie or brotherhood in such moments. Now, if you don't look at a map, you might not fully understand this part. So, where is the Bashi Channel? It's directly south of Taiwan. To the south of Taiwan, there's a body of water, and after crossing it, you'll reach the Philippines. The Bashi Channel's western side on the left side of the map is the South China Sea, where the American submarine had its collision. Heading east from the Bashi Channel, you reach the Philippine Sea, and going further east, you exit the second island chain, So, think carefully about this. In September 2021, the Carl Vinson passed through the Bashi Channel into the Strait of Malacca. The target was clear Myanmar. But by October, it left through the Bashi Channel, fleeing eastward. What does this tell us? Based on this route and the events, you can deduce that the Carl Vinson originally thought, let's deal with Myanmar first, cut off China's back route, and head into the South China Sea. But before it could even reach Myanmar, the USS Connecticut, the nuclear submarine following behind, collided with an unknown object. It was in a bad shape, drifting at sea for a week before managing to survive. So what did the Carl Vinson think? Oh no, a war's breaking out. Even the mighty USS Connecticut was taken out just like that. This isn't good. I'm here all alone, better run. And so, it turned tail and fled. These events unfolded between August and September, just in a few months. You see how decisive we can be. Now, you might be wondering, could the Carl Vinson really just run away like that? Keep watching. After that, the Carl Vinson didn't dare re-enter the South China Sea. It stopped in the waters off the Philippines. Just as we mentioned earlier, after exiting the Bashi Channel, it stayed in Philippine waters. Look it up online, and you'll find that in November 2021, the Carl Vinson had two accidents. First, an F/A-180 Super Hornet was training over Philippine waters when its left engine suddenly caught fire. It had to make an emergency return to the carrier, almost crashing into the deck. The second incident was during an anti-submarine drill when a sonar was deployed, and it was lost nowhere to be found. Now, let me explain something here. Do you know how anti-submarine helicopters work? They carry multiple sonar buoys, which are highly advanced pieces of technology. These sonar buoys are incredibly expensive, and if the data they carry falls into the hands of another country, it's game over for submarine detection. Let me give you an example, though this is just to illustrate the point. Let's say this sonar buoy is set to detect enemy submarines within a 100 Hz frequency range. Now, if this buoy were recovered by us, we could open it up and discover that the Americans use a 100 Hz frequency. We then modify our submarines so they emit no signals within that range. From that point on, all American anti-submarine sonars would fail to detect our submarines. That's the general idea. As long as you understand that, we're good. So, losing that sonar buoy was a huge disaster. The financial loss was over $2 million, but more importantly, the U.S. Navy had to update all its anti-submarine equipment data. Now, think about these two incidents that happened in November 2021. Why did they occur? Who picked up the sonar buoy? To this day, it remains a mystery. As for why the Super Hornet almost crashed into the deck, nobody knows. It was just a series of bizarre coincidences. But these strange events on the Carl Vinson are nothing compared to what came next. The next incident was even more mysterious, and it nearly pushed the U.S. military to abandon its strategy in Myanmar. This is also why, last year in 2023, people online were questioning why, with Myanmar in such chaos, hasn't the West intervened? Normally, the U.S. loves to get involved, right? But no one showed up. We'll talk about that next time.